Welcome to the recorded virtual office hours. I was just telling the people who are here that I'm going to pick on them and ask them to tell me how they think the course is going and if there's anything that could be improved to better meet needs. So I'm just going to go left to right on my little screen down here. Kate Mockler, if you don't mind going first. Are you sure? I'd appreciate it.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Katie Mockler. I think the course is going well so far. I kind of waited for last minute to do my discussion board, but I did do it on time. Yeah, I think it's going well. Did almost done with my city training, so happy about that. But aside from that, I think it's pretty straightforward, and I think I'm doing okay.
Very good. Thank you. Good job getting everything done. John, do you mind going next?
Yeah, not a problem. As far as the course goes, so far so good. It's really my first online complete, course like this. With a full-time job to be expected, for me, it's just time management. It has nothing to do with the course per se. This just works better for me, where I can kind of work at it when I have the time. I like your videos. I think they're super informative. I really have no complaints. I mean, at this point, everything is being presented as advertised. I'm sure going further and deeper into like your last video, I can pretend and say I understood everything you were talking about. I'd be a big liar. But I can go back and read. I do the little note thing on there. It's really helpful for me, so I can go back and look at it. But that's what I got.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I do worry about the videos going too fast because, normally if I'm doing a lecture like that, I'll stop periodically or people will ask me a question and that gives us some time to kind of digest. And you don't have that when it's just me talking at a computer. But hopefully you can counterbalance that by being able to watch them multiple times. And if there's anything anyone ever doesn't understand, just make a note of it and come here and tell me. Or if you or one of the people who can't actually make it to the office hours, just let me know. Could you go back over X in your office hours? And that'll give me a chance to revisit and maybe try using some different language this time to see if I can make it clearer. This time here, this virtual office hours, I think of it partly as office hours and partly as that little gab time you have with the professor at the start of every class, where students can ask about their assignments that are working on. You can deal with any business, and students can also say, I really, I didn't understand last week we talked about this. Could you go back over that? So this is your time to do with as you choose. But yeah, I know that the videos are probably going to be dense because it's an entire lecture for an entire week into whatever that is, 20 minutes or so. Thank you. Okay, so we have Elizabeth Fennelly. And I can't remember offhand if either of you Elizabeth were Liz, and I apologize if so.
So I'm actually finding that it works really well. I like the online course format. I did my undergrad, or one of my undergrads that way, and some postgraduate work that way. So it's a matter of making sure that I don't procrastinate, because whenever you're sort of building the relationships with folks online is a lot harder than when you're in person. People can't tell your written sarcasm versus humor. So you read and reread and read and reread before you post, and then you freak out as soon as you post because maybe they won't understand it. And so that's what I always find really difficult, just because we kind of haven't been working with each other for a long time and don't have relationships yet with each other. So we don't know, we kind of don't have our funny classroom stories yet that we can kind of go back and pull from.
Right.
But it's nice that we're the same cohort across our classes. So things that happen in this course, we're aware of in other courses, so we do have a little bit more of interaction, given that we're doing our videos, which are and I'm being very sarcastic, my favorite thing ever. I only re-record them like 6 times and then eventually just kind of back out. But I really like that. I really like having that you break down in the lectures. You've got, with the video lectures, you can go back and you know where it is in time. So even if you're just going through and you're like, okay, I don't understand this, I know where to go back and find it. I know it's 3 minutes and 24 seconds in. I know that's where it's in. So that's super helpful. And then I go back and watch it again and then have the benefit of having Google on the side to say, I have no idea what that term is. Help me to figure out what this is. So that works really well for me. I don't really have any complaints. It's online means that I can be working full-time and still doing something like pursuing education. So I'm grateful that the university offers this in a completely online format.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good to hear. And I hope, I don't know if I'll do this every single week at the beginning of my office hours, but I really do want people to feel free to give me any critiques that would make it better. This isn't, I'm not kidding. I want to hear it, and I'm not going to hold it against anybody who gives me a critique. Because if one person's feeling it, especially if one person's feeling it and thinking about saying it, I know they're not the only one who's having that problem. So it just helps me if people will promise to be honest with me about things that I could do to improve. So thank you. And Elizabeth, it's Stokesbury, right? I only see part of your name.
It is, and it's because it's such a long name, and even on my driver's license, they have to do like the first letter of my name, and then my middle name, and then Stokesbury. So that's why I go by Liz. But so the format of this class is really similar for me. I've done some hybrid courses before where you do the posting, and then so this pretty much is the exact same format. And this is also my second time around with the textbook. It's just as tough the second time around as it was the first time around when I did research as an undergrad.
Wow, I've never heard of an undergrad class using this textbook.
Yep.
Where were you?
Nazareth College in Rochester, Dr. Leanne Charlesworth.
Huh. I don't know her. That's interesting.
Yep, she used that textbook.
This is definitely a graduate level textbook.
Yeah, it was definitely more of an undergrad class than it was what I'm seeing now. And I think I was doing pretty fine with maintaining the coursework and doing the posts and making sure everything, up until last night when I sent my panic email to you about when I started looking at the single subject design, and I really started panicking because I thought it was so much bigger in scope than what the actual lecture was giving, the scope of it. So yeah, I think I'm doing okay though.
Okay, very good. Good to hear it. I'm glad you were able to make it too. Your email was one that I wanted to address. Before we dive into that, does anybody else have any questions at the moment?
I think that probably is the single subject design is probably the reason that we all managed to make it at 6 p.m.
You broke up a little bit there. Could you repeat some of that?
I think we probably all have similar questions about the single subject design, and yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have a specific question, or should I just start babbling?
I think maybe just starting from the beginning.
Okay, so again, I expect the vast majority, if not all of you, to do this project on yourselves. I would definitely encourage you to think about other options, because I think you can get a lot out of it if you do it even with your friend. I've had people do projects with roommates or sisters or boyfriends, although I'm always worried that somebody's going to break up because of my project. And actually, it may have happened one time, but I think the project just uncovered their need to break up. So, Doing it with children is a little tough because, as you all know, for doing your CT or city training, however you pronounce that, children are protected subjects. And I'm kind of serving as your IRB, your institutional review board. You don't have to go through the IRB for this project. It would be silly to have you do so. So I'm sort of pretending I'm in that role and making sure that your research projects are impeccably ethical. And so doing any research with children, I'm really skeptical about. I think I've approved one or two mothers who wanted to do things with their children that were very, very low risk. I think like helping them to pick up their toys every day or something like that is the level we're talking about here. But most people do work on something with themselves. And it's a lot of stress, dealing with stress, a lot of dealing with anxiety. There was a couple projects the last time I taught, I did this that were on gratitude, on feeling more grateful. I thought that was really interesting. And because most of you are just beginning, you're not, EMDR certified, not that you could even do EMDR yourself. The interventions people choose to use are things like adult coloring books, or a meditation app, or exercising 30 minutes a day, or something like that. Very basic sort of interventions. But it's the sort of thing you might do with a social work client. And that's sort of the parameters for the project, as I said in the lecture, is that it needs to be some sort of content, some sort of thing that you might work on with a social work client. And encouraging them to use a mindfulness app or a meditation app is definitely something that you could see yourself doing with a social work client, right? Maybe not in every context, but some of them. And then, so once you sort of picked on sort of the things you want to work on with yourself and maybe an intervention that would make sense to do with it, you have to figure out 2 ways to measure your outcomes. And next week is the week that we talk about measurement. And you'll need to have a published scale for one of your outcome measures, as I said in the first lecture on single subject design. That'll make more sense after next week. And I'll go ahead and say now that to find those, you'll want to do things like look at articles that you're reading on your topic, or go to psych tests and do some searching. And you can try Googling too. I do not expect anybody to pay money to access a scale. There are scales out there for which people would have to pay a few $100s. I mean, if you want to, by all means, knock yourself out, but that is not my expectation. And you should be able to find a scale that you don't have to pay for. And if you shoot me an email, I might be able to help with that too. You can also ask Howard Pykoff, the social work librarian, for help. Oh, and I haven't actually mentioned the research tutors in this class. It's just one tutor, Andrew Irish is his name. You probably got his contact info at orientation. I think you should still have that, along with the contact information for the writing tutors. And he would be able to help you too if you're having trouble. And he gets paid to talk to you, so don't be shy. Shoot him an email. And then the other outcome measure for your single subject design can be whatever you want. You can feel free to use 2 published scales. That's fine. Or you can use something that's more, that's simpler to do. People do a lot of self-anchored rating scales, as they're called, and that's, today, between a 0 and 10, this is how stressed I am, 10 being the most stressed I've ever felt in my life, and 0 being not stressed at all. And you would just, every day, going to bed or something like that, just jot down the number that best represents your overall stress levels that day. So that's the actual research project that you're going to do. In terms of writing it up, the proposal, and I want to remind everybody at this point, the proposal is 5% of your grade. It's really tiny, and it's meant to be tiny so that people don't freak out about it. Because even if you totally bombed it, it still wouldn't affect your grade that much. it's only, you know, if you got like a 60% on it, that's still like, you know, you lose 2 points from your final grade, and that's no big deal. They are both meant to be written in APA style. The first one, to practice APA, for those of you who never really felt like you got good at it doing your bachelor's degrees. And also so that you can see different standards in graduate school. And so the proposal is really just, you know, telling me what you want, what you're going to do, so that I can improve it and make sure you're on the right track, as well as giving yourself a start of a literature review. And then the final project will be writing it up in a way that's very similar to a peer-reviewed publication of research, but shorter. It's not as long as peer-reviewed papers usually are. How'd I do? How was that for babbling? Was that informative enough? Questions?
No, I think it's much better than what I built it up in my mind to being. And so I watched your video, like when I got to the end, I reversed it. Like I thought I missed it. I'm like, did she say do it on yourself? And I'm thinking of like groups when you said states. I'm like, when do I start compiling this information? Like I'm so behind. So I appreciate you. You said it in the video, but then you said it again. So now I know it's true. You know.
That's good. You can do it with a state, but I don't think
absolutely not.
You're going
absolutely not. I'll choose myself. Thank you, Professor.
I do have a question. So is it okay if like, if we have similar subjects? Like a lot of times teachers will have you sign up for a subject so that there's not a repetitive nature to it.
Yep, I don't care if I read 22 papers on the same topic.
Okay.
Yeah, nope, no problem there at all. It is meant to be an individual assignment, so as you get to be friends with people, you know, I would feel a little weird if people were doing, like if I knew that you and John were friends, you're next to each other down there, see? And you were both doing stress and you had the same outcomes and the same intervention, and your lit reviews looked really similar. That's when I would start to be questioning whether these are really independent works, but no, there's no, otherwise I'm not worried at all. I want you to work on this individually.
Okay. Thanks.
That's a good question. Any other questions? That's not due for a few weeks, right? You have some time. Let me pull up the syllabus and make sure I'm remembering how much time you have. Yeah, that's not due until March 4th, so a little under a month to get it together. And another thing people ask me all the time, and I'll say this again, is that, you know, when you had the proposal, can you use what you wrote there again in your final paper? And absolutely. The proposal is meant to be like, you can open that same document and start working on the final paper from the proposal. And one thing I'll point out, in case it's not obvious, that this class is really built to reward effort. You know, 30% of your grade is that right? That's what I'm remembering. Let me make sure that's correct before I keep going. Yeah, 30% of your grade is the discussion board. And I grade that pass fail. I just look to make sure you've done your posts, and you know, I read it to make sure that everything looks good. Usually I have a rule of responding to everybody's posts, but there's too many of you. I'm not going to try to do that this year. The last time I taught this class, there were 6 students. So 6 to 22, it just means that it's not possible for me to respond to every single post. Especially because my life is very different with a newborn in the house, a newborn and 3 other kids. But if you're doing that work, if you're putting in that time, you should have a 100% grade as for 30% of your final grade. And that's very intentional because I know how nerve-wracking this class is to so many of you. So I want you to just do the discussion board as diligently as you would attend class, and that'll put you on a really good path to having a good grade in this class. All right, other questions?
I'm not afraid to look silly. The format for the proposal, was that part of the original email you had sent out with the version of, I think it was a single subject design paper, and you wanted us to follow that format? Or we would go off that, I think you would even said in it, like, you know, kind of fill in your information, but go by this format, how the final paper is supposed to look?
So that's just a template for all of your APA papers.
All of them, okay.
The format on the assignments page are detailed paper guidelines.
Okay.
And I'm guessing you haven't seen those based on how you're asking?
I might have and just looked over it, and for some reason now, like I said, I'm not afraid to look silly. It came to my mind, and I'm like, let me just bring it up. But if I know you sent everything else, so I know it's error on my part, but I'll go back and look at it. If it was in the on Blackboard, I'll find it.
Yeah, so it's one document for both assignments. It's the same page where you get information on the plagiarism assignment and the.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
So the one document is there's a lot more information about the final paper because it's a much bigger assignment. The proposal is usually just a few pages.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, if you wanted to write more for your proposal, feel free, but because it's meant to be just sort of the beginning of your project, I don't want you to go too far down working on it, just in case I tell you, we need to tweak this, the way you're thinking about it isn't quite right.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to say this every single time. Nobody should start their projects until you've heard back from me about your proposals. Especially if you're doing it with another person. And I'll also try to keep saying, if you're doing it with another person, I do need you to develop an informed consent document. There's examples online and there's examples in your book. You can just Google informed consent and you'll find all kinds of examples. Some of them are crazy long and ours don't need to be long, just not even a page. But if you're doing it on yourself, I do not need you to sign an informed consent document for yourself. Any other questions? Is this feeling stressful?
No.
No.
We have 3 no's and 1 yes. That's okay. You know, keep in mind it's not due until, you know, May. There's a lot of time between now and then. And so the bulk of your work in this class will be discussion board posts. It's a lot of posting, you know, so that it's sort of, you know, applied learning. That's how you're going to get through the content of this class. Elizabeth Stokesbury, are you talking? You're muted still.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I just had one question. So how many weeks should we actually be taking the data?
That is a great question. If you've watched the video, you know that you need to have a bare minimum of 3 time points in each phase. And that's really very low. So it does kind of depend on how often you're taking your measurements. So theoretically, you could do this project in a week if you took daily measurements, but that makes your professor unhappy. That's really not enough time, and you should know from your other social work classes that if you're trying to effect change, you need it to go a little bit more slowly than that. I have never set strict parameters like you need to spend this many weeks doing your project. I did tell somebody who turned in a proposal to me, and she was like an A+ student, so she had just kind of figured out that this didn't need to be long to get data. She had it planned to do 2 weeks for the whole project, and I told her, let's extend that. So most people do, let's see, the proposals are due March 4th, and the projects are due May 13th. So that's about about 10 weeks, but you got to have some time to let me give you feedback on your project. You got to have time to write up your project. So usually people spend about 6 to 8 weeks doing it. Now you'll notice there that if you do weekly measures, that would only give you 3 time points for each phase if you are on the 6-week side of that, and you want more than that. If you haven't watched the single subject design lecture yet, this won't make a lot of sense. So just remember, as you're watching it, you'll need to keep in mind that sort of timetable. So this is why most people do either daily or twice a week or every other day or something like that for their measures. Now, I'm okay if one of your measurements is only 3 time points per phase, like if you just do 6 weeks. The trouble is that it may make it really, really hard for you to interpret your results. If you have watched that lecture, I go through like the sort of patterns you might see, and with only 3 time points, you might not have enough data to have a pattern emerge to know whether your intervention worked, for example. So in a sense, like the more time points you give yourself, the easier it is going to be to interpret your data and come to a conclusion.
I had one more question.
Please.
I'm sorry, can you clarify the 3 time points, because I'm confused on that?
Yeah, so this is like if you're measuring your stress levels and you are doing adult coloring books or whatever. So in your baseline phase, you're going to want to measure your stress levels a certain number of times. And then maybe you're journaling each night your stress levels from that day. And then you're going to start your intervention every day. So you might color in your coloring book and then write down your stress levels after that. And you do that every day for a little while. When I say 3 time points, basically I'm talking about how many times you take your measurements of your own stress levels. So if you're journaling every day, that would mean you only did 3 nights. And you can imagine that that is a pretty small snapshot of your stress levels over time, especially if you think about things like weekend effects. So you would really want to have more time points to look at of your stress levels, both before you started your coloring books and after you started doing your coloring books. Did that help? Did that example help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. We think of these as measurement time points or observations, like the number of times you observe your outcomes. As you know, I don't even know what I'm trying to say right now. I guess I'll go back to the scale analogy, because most people these days have at some point in their life tried to lose weight. And you know that your weight just fluctuates. So you would want to, if you really wanted to compare like Jenny Craig versus paleo or whatever it is that the kids are doing these days. I guess keto is the big thing right now. And you wanted to see if it's going to have an effect on your weight, you would first want to make sure that you have a good sense of what your starting weight is. So you wouldn't just look at your scale once, you would look at your scale a few times to know, okay, I'm really 200 or 205 or get a sense, because your weight does fluctuate day to day, especially if you are a binge eater or something like that, or your hydration varies a lot. Any other questions? Well, I'm sure people will have more questions. Hopefully, the emails I got were definitely about this project, so I think I've addressed the questions, and hopefully it doesn't feel like too overwhelming a project. It is.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
If you're using kind of a medical monitoring system or something like that, can you incorporate the data from that?
Well, that is a great question. That is a great question. So first of all, I'm always a little hesitant to have projects that are more medical in scope, partly because I'm not a doctor. No matter how many medical TV shows I've watched, I'm not really competent to say.
Anatomy in-house are not the answer.
Right. So I'll say that. But second of all, people have definitely used sort of biometric data sources in these projects. So people will use like their Fitbits or there's various apps that purport to measure things like your quality of sleep. And I'm okay with people using those. The only thing about using those is that you're going to have to address in your paper something about whether we think this is a reliable and valid measurement tool. And that'll make more sense after the measurement week. So for example, people have actually now studied if Fitbits capture good data. So you would probably need to have a paper, a citation addressing whether Fitbits capture good data. You're not going to find that for every app on the web, on Play stores or the app stores that purports to measure your quality of sleep or any other anything else like that. But if you can, if you're prepared to make an argument that it is a reliable and valid measure, at least sufficient for this project, then I'm open to you using it so long as it's within the scope of a social work project. Hi, Chelsea. Oh, Chelsea is muted.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right. You're coming in a little bit late, which is fine, but I'm just letting you know that we've been talking for a while, and I think questions are starting to wane. We've talked a lot about the project. It's all going to be recorded and posted online. Do you have any questions about the project or anything else?
I don't know, honestly. I'll have to read it.
That's okay.
Is this being recorded?
This is being recorded.
Okay, so I'll go back through it, and if I do, I'll just message you.
That sounds good. Everything going okay for you in the course? Are you doing okay navigating everything?
Yes. Apparently I didn't read the syllabus well enough, and my other class, everything was due Sunday at midnight. So I'm still kind of getting used to the difference in times. So I will work on that.
I did want to say that, these deadlines are arbitrary. And I could change them if people wanted.
I mean, that would be, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Once I know that they have different times, that's okay with me. But like I said, my other class is midnight, and I just assumed, you know.
Yeah. Well, everybody's in the same classes, so if we wanted to consider having everything be due Sunday at midnight, I'm okay with thinking about that.
Mhm. And I would be okay with that too, but it's not just up to me.
What does everybody else in here think?
You definitely have my vote. That's easy.
To make everything due at Sunday?
Yeah, I'm going to give us an extra 2 days to lock it. It would coincide with the other class.
Yeah.
The only thing is that the original posts do need to be due before so that people have time to respond.
Right.
They keep the original post Wednesday and then the response Sunday?
Well, I could even do the original post due on Friday and the responses due on Sunday.
That works.
I like it even better.
Is it an option for us if we were to still follow the original timeline?
Yeah, you can post it whenever. It might
schedule works. I'd like to have things broken out over a series of days rather than have a lot of deadlines all the same day. So it would be an option to still follow the original schedule, even if that's not the assigned schedule?
So the only thing that would potentially be tricky, because you could make your original post whenever. I mean, you could post.
And then I think to myself 3 times.
Right.
Which might not be great.
That's the part. Most of the time, there's going to be plenty of people posting a little bit early. That especially if the original post is due by Friday at midnight, I'm sure you could find people who have already posted by Friday so that you could continue to respond to people by then. But I will tell you, as the semester progresses, more and more people tend to do it right at the deadline. So it does get a little tricky. What do people think? I hate to impulsively change something that's in the syllabus, but I noticed people seem to really struggle with the deadlines this week. I've sent out a lot of emails. So I was wondering if this is something we needed to do to make things easier for people.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it either way, like I said. But now that I know there's a deadline of, I don't even know, I haven't even read it still. I've just been crazy, but the deadline of Wednesday for the initial post is not a big deal. And then the earlier deadline for the follow-ups are fine too.
All right, I'm going to ask you, supposedly there is a hand raise function here. When I was working, when I was test driving this with our internal IT people, though, we couldn't get it to work. So I'm just going to ask you to physically raise your hand if you would like to change the deadlines to Friday and Sunday.
I mean, it doesn't.
And let me ask you to raise your hand again if you don't really have a strong preference.
Okay.
Okay, you all raised your hands both times.
Well, so I can see both ways, and I think that's part of being a social worker, seeing both sides of it. One way is it does keep me like doing things ahead of time, so I'm not just piling everything on the weekend. On the other hand, it means that like my work week could be really busy, and then I have to come home and do homework. So I can see either or. That's where I'm at with it. So I'll go with what everyone else wants to do.
Agreed.
I think it's a similar situation for me as well. I know that a lot of different people, if you're working shifts, having more flexibility in your deadlines definitely makes it easier. And as long as there'll always, I'm sure, be some folks that'll be posting a little bit earlier or not, so we can accommodate probably in terms of responses. And if not, then you just kind of cram in a whole lot you just sort of set some time aside for whatever that day of the weekend it is.
I wouldn't mind the extra time. I know for me, I was actually lucky that I ended up posting earlier on Tuesday because Wednesday we actually had a power outage from like 5 o'clock at night till 12 o'clock in the evening, which of course is right after I get out of work. And so for me, you know, having the extra time, I wouldn't mind it, but if everybody's okay with keeping the original schedule, that's fine.
I think from listening to you, I think I'm going to go ahead and change it. Partly because I do think it's less confusing for students to manage across classes if it's relatively consistent. And I know how confusing the online class format is. And also because the main reason I'm hearing for keeping it earlier is so that people can get it done earlier. But you can still do that. So I'm not hearing a strong argument against extending it. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'll put this in an email when I send out the link to these office hours. And I will confirm that your first post will be due Friday at midnight and responses to your classmates due Sunday at midnight. Sorry, I've had this cough for weeks. It's not going away. And I'm sure it's really annoying in the videos too. I can't do anything about it. Anything else we want to talk about? Okay, well, if nobody has any questions, we can go ahead and sign off instead of sitting here staring at each other. Thank you all for coming and being brave enough to speak up and ask your questions. They were all really good questions. I will be posting this video, and if you think of anything else that I should have addressed, feel free to let me know, and we'll do this again next week, so we'll have plenty more time to talk about the project then.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Professor? I have a couple questions, but I'd prefer to keep it like for after everybody signs out.
Oh, okay. Then you and I can stay, sure.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And I assume you want me to not record, right?
Yes, please.
I will stop it and let everybody go. I will have a good week, everybody, and I will see you online and back here next week.
Great. Bye.